Well, hello, everyone, for yet another episode of the Customer Success Management Practice, CSM Practice Podcast. I'm super excited about today because not every day we get to speak to somebody on this podcast that has been in customer success as long as I have. And so I'd like to present to You Mon Tsang, who has been the CEO of ChurnZero since 2015 when he founded the company. I want to take this conversation to what was it like back then and what is it like right now working with customers and heads of customer success, and where does he see the future? Where does this all going? Like, where is this industry going? Where do CCOs needs to focus on, CSMs? What's coming up in the tech stack? Yuman, thank you so much for joining me today. It's such an honor.
Oh, thank you for having me, Irit.
Tell me, Yuman, in 2015, as far as I remember, back then it was about getting churn to being zero. What were you doing in 2014 that in 2015 you said, yep, I'm going to start this company?
I've been in SaaS for quite a while. And as you know, it kind of took some time for us to figure out the business model of SaaS because software used to be kind of a one-time sell. You paid everything up front and then you paid smaller maintenance fees. And so it was always the beginning. You had to land the sale. Once you got the sale, you were kind of done. But subscription business SaaS changed the way people think about it. And so that meant the making sure customers are happy with your product and service, over and over and over again. You have to prove yourself over and over and over again. And that's when customer success as a practice, as a department grew. And it took a long time for us to all figure that out. Well, actually, in 2014, I was at a company, we were publicly traded. We were selling SaaS products to micro businesses, small businesses, even enterprise. So we ran the gamut. And I owned the customer success team, and churn was a problem. And it became clear the impact of churn on our metrics. I think we were trying to grow 40% year over year, but we were, especially in our small business, churning enough where that became hard for new sales to catch up. So you looked at that as like, oh, we were data driven. And so the impact of churn was super obvious. I grew up on the marketing side, Reed. I built a lot of marketing technology. Marketing technology is impressive. A typical CMO in 2015 had access to tech stack that understood what every prospect was doing, everything they were clicking, every site they were visiting, every email you were opening, you would score them for sales, and often you send them over there. And then when I went over to the CSM side, it was like, oh, I have a telephone, I have an email, and I have Salesforce. And that's what I have to use in order to help my customers. And that became clear. It's like, well, that's weird. The most important asset in your entire company is your customer base, and they have the worst tech stack. And that was sort of where I said, hey, let's take some of this great technology that's sort of understood with marketing automation and try to slowly apply the best of that to CS. And that's how ChurnZero was started, was to try to bring the insights, the automation, the playbooks, the workflow to CS.
Unlike marketing, I would say that was a little bit of a bigger bet on your end because back in 2015, there weren't a lot of customer success teams.
There were not. I mean, there were some early, the pioneers in CS, the tech space. Some of them are still with us today. A lot of them are no longer here. It took a while for all of us to build out CS. And there were not that many CS organizations. When it's all new, everyone was doing things slightly differently. And so if you go to CS team A versus B versus C, boy, like the practices were not the same. Best practices were not agreed upon. Even some of the metrics were not agreed upon. And I think that makes hard for tech builders to build technology because we don't want to build a development environment. Oh, take my product and do your 10, 15, 20, 50 different things. You kind of want to build tech around best practices. These are the 12 ways that you can actually manage your customers in the best way. And we handle 10 of them, say. So that's sort of where technology actually grows. But it did take a while till CS became integral part of every SaaS company. Do you follow Jason Lemkin?
Yeah, of
The
course.
godfather of SaaS. And he said one thing I think that paved the way for SaaS and CS. And he said, your first CS hire should be a single digit hire. And what that meant was it had to be employee 1 through 9, single digit. One of your first 9 employees should be a CS person of some kind managing your customers. And I think when it became sort of a nice sort of, oh, I get that, that's the benchmark. right? That's what we ought to be doing. And I think that was a groundswell for having startups build CS and then bigger companies who never had CS starting to say, oh, I better think about this as a best practice.
2014, you work in marketing, you own CS, you see the churn issues. What were you going to offer the market with ChurnZero back in the day that you felt like the market was missing? What was going to be your go to market strategy, your unique differential? What were you going to tackle that you felt like, yep, they're not picking this up?
There were two big things actually. So one, initial offerings were very kind of dashboard heavy, focused on reporting and answering questions, which I think are super important. I actually started my software career in business intelligence. But the one thing I've actually discovered about analytics and analytics products is that in of themselves, they are nice to have. They just tell me the data. I want a system that takes that information and then acts on it, supports the end user in their day to day. That was our thinking that we brought to ChurnZero. We wanted not only to bring the data in, organize it, turn it into metrics, but then have it kick off automated plays, kick off journeys, send off alerts, basically start to support the CSMs in what they do. Give them air cover. How does the data drive automations, drives workflow? And then the second thing was that early on, when you're sort of developing CS, some of the early players started to go up market in a big way. Oftentimes, it's those companies that are bigger with bigger budgets that can actually take a risk on buying a CS platform. But with that, the complexity got bigger, the price tags got bigger. And so we decided to say, hey, let's have a system that can focus on the mid market, help growing companies get into a customer success platform easily, quickly, and grow with them. And so there was a bit of a focus on the mid market as well.
Back then, you say one of the challenges was just like, okay, how do you build an application with no best practices? Everybody's a little different. How do you appease all of them? And then second challenge, I think back in 2015 is, well, there aren't a lot of CS teams. And if there are, the budget is not great. How much changed since 2015? Now we're at 2024. You Mon, you tell me.
There's some things that have changed and there's some things that haven't changed. Still, the majority of customers that we bring on to ChurnZero are using a CSP for the very first time. That was true in 2015, and that is still true in 2024, which means that I say market share penetration of CSPs into existing SaaS companies is probably still maybe at 40% penetration. So which means that I would say 60% of folks out there who could use a CSP is not using a CSP. But I think that has not changed. And what also hasn't changed is with those companies that are doing it for the first time, we're still helping them sort of understand the ROI, talk to their CX team, their CXO peers on why investing in the technology is a good idea. So those things are kind of, that was more sophisticated and whatnot, but in general, that those steps still happen. What has changed a lot is you don't have to convince the CCO or the CS team why it's important. You may have to convince the CFO because they've never bought it before. They've never signed DocuSign that has CSP in it. So those people's CFO still has to be convinced. But the CCO and the CS person, they're like, it's a matter of when, it's not a matter of if. We've gone a lot from if I bring a CSP on to when I bring a CSP on if you don't already have it. And I think that makes for a very different conversation. It's sort of about planning and timing. And I think that's super different. And that's just the selling motion and how CS leaders think about, bringing a tech stack into their department.
Hundreds of customers later, if not thousands. You Mon, when is the best time to bring a CS tool in?
I usually say when you sort of have product market fit. And the reason why I say that is that until you find product market fit, guess what? Everything's changing, right? The product can still be changing. The way you service your customers can be changing, but it's when you have product market fit. So maybe from a CS point of view, I can ask sort of the follow-on question. What does that feel like? It feels like you actually have renewed the number of customers in a reliable way using a reliable process. Now, if you're SMB, that could be dozens, if not hundreds of customers or micro businesses. If you're enterprise, maybe it's 4. But it's like, hey, we know why people like using our product or service. We can state that reliably from customer A, B, C, and D. We also feel like we have a decent process for getting them through onboarding, adoption, and renewal. And then when those things are all ticked off, you're hiring maybe your second or third or your fourth CSM. That's when you kind of want to codify that all into a system that is very repeatable. The short answer is when you have product market fit. Metrics driven answer is maybe when you have anywhere from $2 to $3 to $4 million of ARR. Maybe a headcount driven answer is maybe when you have your third or fourth CSM.
Since 2015, did your go-to-market change? You used to tackle mid-market and high growth. Is that still the case?
We do everything from smaller businesses all the way to enterprise.
If you do have enterprise, isn't the answer different for enterprise in terms of when should they buy customer success application? Because their business has already been proven. They've been in business for 20,
Oh
30
yeah.
years.
Oh yeah.
If I'm a CCO or head of CS of an emerging customer success practice in an incumbent, a large company that's been around for a mature company, mature set of products, maybe even multiple regions, possibly some hardware, possibly managed services. I know what I'm doing. I don't need to prove anything. When is the right time? And should I even buy into a customer success application or should I customize my CRM?
Let's just say you're born and raised as a company in 2000s, the knots, and you've been successful. So you've been doing a certain way. You've been able to do it without a CS team just because you have other account managers, you have customer success, you have professional services people. So you're kind of angling around that. And then all of a sudden you wake up and you say, hey, I ought to do CS. One, I actually do think everyone ought to be doing CS. If you have a repeatable business where recurring revenue is important, I think CS is super important. Anytime you decide to do it is a good time to decide to do it. And certainly times that trigger that to happen is my retention rate is going down. My CSAT, NPS are going down. I'm not getting enough expansion or upsell. Right? There's lots of reasons that trigger those types of companies to sort of reach out to a CSP. But in general, you ought to do it. Most of the folks that we talk to in that space are oftentimes maybe have tried a way before and could be using one of our competitors. It could be like, oh, by the way, we made it work because we had a great Salesforce administrator that just worked tirelessly to do that. But that person's gone now and there's no one to upkeep the code. And so now we're looking for a CSP where we don't have to do our own, development. For those types of companies, if they're doing it for the first time, they probably have some homegrown thing where they've hacked together and they're kind of tired of it. And when they see what else is out there, it's like, oh, I want those things. And we kind of have like the junior version of it. We now need to buy into it.
Is there like a bad time? Like it's too early for them to invest in a CS solution?
If a enterprise company is experimenting, starting like the first few months, yeah, figure out the basics. What is the CSM doing? What is he or she responsible for? And then maybe even like put down the customer journey, sort of write out the playbook by hand, because you need those things in order to make a CSP work anyway. If it's a brand new group, you're like, oh yeah, we're here, but what's happening and who's doing what, you do need to at least solve those issues first. Now, sometimes having the technology in front of you, because oftentimes best practices are built into our tech. Oh, you're thinking about doing an onboarding? Oh, you had this weird way of doing things. Rather than like kind of doubling down on that weird way, why don't we talk about sort of the brand new ways? Because you can use digital connections with your customers to collaborate. Oh, we could do that? Oh, we want to do that. So rather than sometimes sort of just reorganizing the stuck old ways, like oftentimes technology will allow you to sort of rethink it, and also oftentimes it's sort of a prompt, right, for you to do all the interesting and the right thing. I mean, there's some reasons to buy low early, right? Because if you're kind of just wanting to build best practices in, CSPs will be a good way to do that.
Well, you mentioned an ROI conversation. It's kind of depressing that we still need to prove the value in investing in customer success in general, let alone in a solution and a tech stack. So I wanted to ask you about when you have these ROI conversations, how do you teach those CFOs or even CEOs to some degree in terms of looking at the value of customer success and why make that investment?
I think the CFOs and CEOs get it. More of an issue is having the CEO feel confident in putting out the ROI conversation. Because the ROI conversation is actually quite simple. Hey, if my team is more informed, if my team has best practices built in, if my team have automated playbooks, there's a couple things that will happen to us. One is we should get our retention rate up. Secondly, we should be more productive. And those are like the top line lever on revenue and the bottom line lever on expenses. These are super strong ROI metrics that a lot of people don't have. So if you just have productivity measures, like, I'm not sure if I believe in productivity, but you have both productivity and you have top line. So the metrics are there. In fact, one of the things that I would encourage CCOs is to work on their own sort of grasp of metrics and analytics. One of the things that a CCO has, for better or for worse, is they have exciting metrics to work with. They also have kind of complex metrics to work with. NRR, GRR, they're actually not GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. They're not GAAP metrics. So some people can actually do it different ways, and calculating is not always easy because your data is always really bad. But if you own those and get confident with those and then use those, I mean, your internal conversations, I mean, CSPs, of course, but like, hey, I need reorganize for these reasons. Oh, I need ops person for these reasons. And those reasons will be backed by those metrics that you have. So if you have good command of those metrics, whether it's retention rates, whether it's sort of book of business productivity, whether CSAT, NPS, all those things you can talk about and be confident about, and you can be like the CXO in your organization that has like wall of evidence to drive your investments. So I encourage CCOs, like if you're not a metrics driven person, do it, get there somehow, like take the classes that you need, learn Excel, learn CSPs, learn the metrics, be confident with it, just talk about it. And I think it'll help your career.
I totally agree. Well, Yuman, I want you to wear your CEO hat for just a second and think for the past almost 10 years now, you had multiple heads of customer success and leaders in that, even within your own organization. As a CEO, besides GRR and NRR, what are the metrics that you're expecting your customer success team to own? And how do you judge them around performance? How do you look at it?
I think bottom line metrics are revenue retention. When a company matures, actually, I will focus on three metrics over time. For your CS team, what's the number one metric this year? I think the three metrics that you can focus on, one is a satisfaction metric like NPS or CSAT. The second one would be NRR, and the third one would be GRR. Define them, CSATs and NPS is just a survey-based metric asking the customer how they feel about your product or the interaction that they recently had with your customer. NRR is net revenue retention, which includes expansion and upsell and cross-sell, right? So how much are you getting from your customers this year versus last year? And then GRR is just the renewal rate. It actually gives you no credit for expansion whatsoever. The customers you bring in, are you keeping that? Those are the three metrics that I think are super important. Until you find product market fit, I think you're focused on NPS and CSAT. Right, because your revenue retention is going to be bananas until then. Like if you don't have product market fit, of course your retention is going to be horrible. So then you have to focus on something else. Are your customers being happy at NPS and CSAT? I think that's the beginning. I think that's how you think about your department, how you comp your CSMs. So now you have product market fit, you're growing, NRR is the most important thing.
Not GRR? I think that naturally, most companies don't even have an upsell strategy. They can't wrap their heads around their ups for the most part.
If you don't have anything to sell, you can't do much.
They're not mature enough. They're still like, oh, let me just get some clients. Let me give the farm out. So one thing is just get the market fit. Okay, we have a use case here. Let's double down on it. Do you agree? Do you think I have a point
I
here?
think if you don't have anything to sell, I will say like a lot of companies, when they're smaller, they will do a lot of land and expand things. Hey, let's start with a department. Hey, let's start with a team. Like that's the only way because it's like, hey, you're just some puny startup. I'm not going to give you all my money up front. Lots of folks sort of start smaller. And also, by the way, just a company, you're naturally focused on growth. You just need to show growth. So NRR becomes that thing. And when you're trying to grow fast, and maybe I'm focused too much on VC-backed companies. So maybe let's separate VC-backed companies from, say, so bootstrap companies. Bootstrap companies, I think, always focus on GRR because you just don't want to lose any customers. They kind of hurt. VC-backed companies, you're focused on growth. Can I get this to be an enormous company? Therefore, I would want say 120% NRR, and I'll take that even if I have like a 75% GRR because that means my worst fit customers are going away. I'm okay with that. but my best fit customers are growing. And then over time, like you have to kind of continuously prove that your product works for all the folks that are coming in your door. And that's where GR really matters. Because I do think there's a big difference. When you're early, the salespeople are selling like bananas. They're going to sell to lots of people. You're not going to get ICP right. GRR is a tougher one. But if you're maturing, then you're like, okay, look, we just shouldn't be selling non-fit customers. And why are we doing that? We know we're going to turn them. And so GRR becomes a sort of a more interesting metric for everybody. But your mileage may vary depending on what you can or cannot sell. Sometimes you just have, I just got this one product. Maybe they can buy seats. Maybe they can buy this. So we don't have an NRR lever.
I've been doing a lot of research, even through LinkedIn messages, and kind of trying to see what I found is that a lot of companies don't even track net retention rate or don't have the capability. And certainly CS doesn't know what's the exact number. And that is, I would say, if I had to guess, 60% of the company, if not more, even though they even have customer success teams, they still don't track net retention rate for a number of reasons. That's just been my personal feel of it. Let's put it this way, because I didn't do like a market research around that. But that's like from the people that said, nope, we don't even track that. We don't know. Ooh.
But you're saying that these folks who can track NRR can track GRR?
Correct, because then they basically track logo churn.
Okay, but that's not GR. I mean, you can track logo churn. Logo churn is easy to do.
That you could do gross retention rates are both on dollar churn and on logo churn.
But you have to know contraction and all that.
Well, now we're getting into the gritty of it. Like it's not like a gap.
It's not a gap thing.
But if it was gap, we would have a dictation of what's the standard for GRR. Do you include downsell or not? Usually NRR includes the downsell, the upsell, and then GRR usually is just, did you retain the customer? Yes or no? But one could argue that some companies include downsell and detraction, as you call it, in GRR.
We think about GRR. Unfortunately, the GRR number is like the punitive number. You get, in our case, like the downsells are there, the contractions are there, but you get no credit for expansion.
I don't like including downsell in gross retention rate numbers because it's harder to analyze. So from an analysis standpoint, it's less pure. Now you don't know what causes the GRR to be 98% or 92%. If you just make it pure, it's just the churned dollars, then you know exactly where the issue is. One could argue you could then have a clean metric for just upsell rates and downsell rate. And so I think that's where originally GRR came from, was to say, well, how bad is it? Customers actually leave you. What is the impact of customers literally walking away? If you start putting downsell in it, you also say, well, what's the perceived value? How good is your adoption? One could argue either way.
I think logo churn is super important, right? I think that's maybe how I would view logo churn. I think there are some things from, let's say, GRR with contraction. It can actually give you some hints on your business model. So maybe give you an example. Let's just say you sell into SDRs. You basically do a license. For every SDR, I'm going to charge $100 a month, which, making math easy. And then AI comes along, just make it up. I need one half the SDRs I used to have. You're going to contract like crazy, right? Because every company you work with will have 50% fewer SDRs. They'll still use your product, but they'll have 50% fewer. And so your logo retention will still look good, but your GRR with contraction is going to look horrible. It's going to be horrible. And so you have to ask yourself that question: why is my GRR with contraction so horrible? It's like, oh, seat-based licenses are no longer the future because of productivity. Just answering those types of questions.
I think it just strengthens my point that you do need to separate them.
Oh, yeah.
Because contraction and downsell is actually an important metric if it is tracked separately, because it does point out on a different problem than client leaving. Now, combined, one could say, well, if you have a lot of churn, you don't have churn, you just have discounts, well, something is happening in the market. If you have churn and discounts, then your value prop is not happening. Your clients are not picking up or you putting down. You better rethink your value proposition, which brings me to my next question. As a CEO, how important it is for you, for your head of CS, to know what's their cost to serve ratio or rate?
so important because otherwise you're naive. Think about the conversations you're going to have with your CEO if you're the CCO. If you're just walking in, it's like, I need 100 more people in my staff. And because I need to service my customers, because my CSAT's low, and my NPS is low, and my renewal rate's low, you're just asking for resources. Guess what? You become a cost center at that point. You're just asking a naive question. In fact, you can say, hey, look, at most companies, folks are spending somewhere between 5 and say 15% on their CS, which is, by the way, I think that large range. So, that's one problem, but that is actually a real range. We are at 4%. But you as a CCO can say, hey, we're spending 4% now. We're below the low end. I need X number of CSMs. And by the way, benchmark wise, will get us to where we need to be. These are the impacts that we are targeting for retention. And I think we'll get there and pay itself off. So you're having the conversation both in maybe your CEO is not going to care. I don't care what everyone else is doing, but most CEOs do care, right? They want to build best in class companies, they want to know what other best in class companies are doing. So I think you have to know your benchmarks and know how much it costs for you to service your customers. So I think it's super important.
Do you tell CFOs to include in the cost to serve also support? Or do you recommend doing the cost to serve calculations separately, support, onboarding, customer success, like have those separated out? And if that's the case, what is a healthy range in your opinion? You probably talk to a lot of CEOs and CFOs as a CEO of a CS software company. What is a healthy range there for just CS?
So we're talking about the COGS line. Generally, if you're a CCO, a percentage of your heads are going to be in the COGS line, the cost of goods sold. And then a percentage of your head will probably be in the sales and marketing line. And if you're a SaaS company, there's always like trying to get your COGS to be as low as possible. So you get your net margin to be as high as possible. Sort of the gold figure is 80% net margin, so 20% COGS. With all that said, of that 20%, probably half of it's going to be like just all the things to deploy your software, right? So data center, DevOps team, whatnot. But in general, I would leave about 10% for those folks who are directly responsible for serving your product. And to me, that is support, implementation. And then if you have professional services, that sort of course, is in there as well because they're actually cost. Well, some people actually do software and service lines differently, which I would recommend. But then generally CSMs, I would say some people put in COGS. Most people put it in sales and marketing because you're servicing your customers, your account manager. If the CSM weren't there, your product will still be running, but you were there to get higher retention. You were there to get higher NRR. Basically, if you like fired your implementation team, could you actually stand up your product? And if the answer is like probably not, it belongs in COGS. If you got rid of your support team altogether and you run the company, like the answer is probably not. But those are generally in COGS.
Do these numbers change? Does the benchmark change in your opinion, your experience, your conversations? Obviously, there's no like survey out there that can tell us for sure. But from your conversations with others and what you know, do these benchmark numbers change when you charge for customer success? And how predominant is it you've seen? Because you work with hundreds of companies.
They do change. I mean, then you have a services component for software. Always the target is like 80% net margins, 20% COGS. For services, it's more 50%. And some people don't make any money at all. So I would say 50% COGS to 100% COGS. So sometimes you want to make money in your services, which is great. You charge for CSMs, you make money on it. It's a different margin. You show them differently. You can kind of just talk about them and just say, hey, we're doing well here and doing pretty well here too for different reasons. Some people say, hey, look, I'm just going to kind of sell my services at cost. That is an initiative. This is by design, it's strategic because we know that if we have great services, man, that the product side is just will kill it. I mean, they will just renew at a higher rate. We will have longer growth. And so services will take the hit on COGS because we know that it will accrue to the product side. And I think that's okay, but it's 50 to 100% cost of goods. So you're making 50% or you're making 0%. And I think that's okay as long as you know why you're doing it.
Yeah. Wow. Amazing conversation. I think it started out with a history of customer success and quickly turned to how do you get the investments for customer success, improve the ROI, to financing it, to proving that it actually works, and what kind of KPIs should you own and understand as the head of customer success? Brilliant conversation. I just wish we had more time, You Mon. This was absolutely wonderful.
Well, we'll do it again. Thanks for having me. And if I were to say one more thing, like know your metrics, own your metrics. And once you're confident with those metrics, I think your career just be unstoppable.
Said the man that started a whole company just because he didn't have the data to manage his customer success team. That's it, folks. If you like this conversation, I got a lot out of it. I really enjoyed it. Maybe it was the accounting nerd in me. Please give this podcast a like, thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as you know, we have a new mastermind program. So if you haven't checked that out, we do have a free membership. You can go ahead, click on that link, and join the conversation. We're going to talk about KPIs, segmentation, engagement models, and even playbooks. So come on in, join us. You mind? Thank you so much. I'll see you all at the next video.